Hello folks, this is Mr. Dan coming to you from the Landscape Design Classroom, and today I'm going to talk to you about understanding greenhouse pesticides. So the main idea here, before we get into this, is anytime you use a greenhouse pesticide or any pesticide in general, you either want to do that under the guidance of somebody with a PA applicator's license, or if you're out of state, whatever state applicator's license that is. Or if you have one of your own, you want to make sure you have that category for being able to spray within a greenhouse. And if you're spraying in an institution such as a school, you want to make sure you have a school and ground applicator's license as well. So the main idea here, how can I select and effectively use greenhouse pesticides? The number one thing I always profess in this class is safety no matter what you do. But when it comes to pesticides, you need to make sure you're reading that label every single time. So questions a grower will ask. So is a pesticide required? At all costs, I pretty much try to avoid using pesticides these days because there's a lot of different chemicals at work here. But if you need to use one, you need to use one. And there's definitely some insects out there and different pests that are only going to be taken out by a pesticide, especially in a fierce competitive world such as greenhouse growing. So will it be cost effective? You must look at cost at pretty much anything and everything. There's some chemicals out there that an ounce might cost $1. There's some chemicals out there that an ounce might cost $1,000. So it's kind of comparable to the healthcare market. So you need to be aware of like what you're spending on and just don't go nuts with it. And also make sure that whatever you're producing, you're still able to make a profit from instead of just throwing money out the door. So what products should be used? How can pesticide resistance be avoided? How can the pesticide be used effectively? And all these kind of go hand in hand. So there's a lot of different pesticide products. You have chemical, plant-based, bacterial. Looking at the picture over here, this is just a type of pesticide. So that'd be Attain TR, micrototal release insecticide. So whenever this releases, it's going to take out whatever insect it's supposed to. So like I said, you want to make sure you read the label on this or whatever pesticide you're using to ensure that it's killing the proper insect and not harming your plant. So different modes of action. So residual, that's going to kill insects through poison remaining on leaf and stem surfaces. So if you have something like an aphid or a whitefly, you're going to when you spray that on the surface, once it makes contact with it on the surface, it is made to kill it. Now, that doesn't always mean it's going to happen on the first application, so you may have to do multiple applications. So short or long activity period, this will come up on the label on how often you should use this product. If it doesn't, you want to make sure you do some research, but make sure you're doing it with reputable sources. So in Pennsylvania here, you will want to use Penn State Extension. That's who I always go to or make a phone call to see if that product is going to be, what the longevity of that product is. So safety ranges from relatively safe to wide harm to humans, pests, and wildlife. So there is a few different categories of pesticides here whenever it comes to the danger of them. So that would be caution, warning, danger, and if it's something really potent, danger, poison. So pesticide classes. Pyrethrums, chlorinated hydrocarbons and DDT relatives, carbamates, organophosphates, insect growth regulators, microbial insecticides, insecticidal soaps and oils, and other pesticides. So we're going to touch a little bit on each of these today in this presentation. So pyrethrums destabilize insect nerve cell membranes. They kill quickly on contact. So kind of think of it as if you're spraying bees. So typically those chemicals in there, some of those peppers, kind of like a mace almost, once it makes contact with that insect, it's going to kill it. So all the stuff you'll see right here on the label, and it might be hard to see in this presentation, is it tells you what it kills, for use where you can use it. So this one's for commercial greenhouse and for use on growing crops. So some sources, flowers in the Chrysanthemum family, low residual activity, synthetic sources, longer residual period. So chlorinated hydrocarbons and DDT relatives. They destabilize insect nerve cell membranes. It was actually, DDT was discontinued in 1972 in the US due to persistent environmental residuals. So what they found was it was having an adverse effect and killing off American bald eagle populations. So seeing that as the national bird, and we don't really want to be injuring plant life, that's why these were discontinued. So some other examples of this, glyphosate, dianchlor, endosulfane, lindane, and methoxychlor. So like I was saying before, a picture down below, the residue was poisoning bald eagles, causing thin eggshells. So when the bird would land back on those eggshells, it would crack, so killing those birds. So it actually had a really negative effect on the bird population, and that's why they discontinued them. So carbamates. These are disruption of insect nerve impulse transmission. Examples of this would be bendiocarb, carbonyl.
Interruption. This is Wednesday, which means the following.
All right, my apologies, folks. So carbamates, disruption of insect nerve impulse transmission. Some examples of this already talked about. Metaldehyde, methiocarb, and oxamil. So organophosphates, disrupt insect nerve impulse transmission. 3 phosphorus compound derivatives, aliphatic, carboxylic, and heterocyclic. And then insect growth regulators. So affect developing insects, but not the adults. So if you spray these and on the adults, it's not going to do anything to those adults. But if you spray the babies or during like the early stage of their life cycle, then it's going to take those out. So methods used: inhibits chitin, affecting the exoskeleton and molting. Juvenile hormone mimics, producing hormone imbalances. So if we take a look at the picture on the right here, we have a red flower beetle larva on the left, true with growth regulator, and untreated healthy adults on the right. So it's actually doing a pretty good job of taking these out on that left side, and you see the adults that survive basically on the right. But remember, this is untreated on the right. So microbial insecticides, also called bacterials. These are materials producing and or containing toxins disrupting the stomach linings of specific insects. So make sure, I say this a million times during my presentations, that you're reading the label on all of this stuff. So if we take a look at this one, that's for use in controlling whitefly aphid thrips. So it's telling you right on the label what it's going to control. And it is meant for indoor, outdoor nursery, and greenhouse. So the ones we're talking about today is greenhouse. And then some examples of this would be bacteria such as Bacillus thuringiensis, viruses, and fungi. So insecticidal soaps and oils trap and suffocate soft-bodied insects by impairing the waxy layer. So once these insects get hit by this stuff, they kind of become trapped, and they kind of basically like asphyxiate, drown, basically whatever this is, kind of gets caught up in that soap. So it's probably a pretty mean and nasty death, but for the plant itself, you're saving the plant. So I actually think insecticidal soaps and oils are a little bit better than a regular pesticide because you're not affecting the plant nearly as much. So there's several forms: unsulfonated residue of petroleum, potassium salts, fatty acids, and vegetable oil products. So some other pesticides, you have botanicals, systemic, fumigant, and inorganic. So some examples of this would be nicotine otenone, methyl bromide, diatomaceous earth, and sulfur. So at most costs, I really would not use sulfur on stuff. I can definitely take out some plants pretty quickly, but in some extreme cases, like I said, do your research before you put any chemical out, and make sure you either do that under the supervision of a trained professional with a license, or make sure you have your license and do your research before you start into this. So how resistant populations develop. So let's take a look at this picture on the right side here. So we have some white flies on a melon leaf. So, and this is after multiple treatments. So these white flies have built up a tolerance over time. So you want to make sure that you're hitting those with, if you're hitting with the same product over and over again, they may not die off. So you want to make sure you're switching your product. So a few insects able to tolerate a certain pesticide. Tolerant insects most likely to survive and mate with other tolerant insects. So whenever those insects start mating, they're going to basically create a superbug that's not going to be affected by that pesticide any longer. More tolerant insects in each generation. So like I just said, like the more that these tolerant insects mate, the harder it's going to be to kill them with that specific pesticide. So most insects tolerant and now pesticide resistant. So like I said, make sure you're rotating your pesticides, because once they're tolerant to something, you can no longer use that pesticide. So switching it up will will definitely help with not building that resistance. So tactics to prevent resistance. So rotating pesticides, like I just said, with other modes of action. Using growth regulators, using insecticidal soaps and horticultural oils. So at the end of the day, what it's saying here is you need to use a lot of different things over short time periods. So if you're using the same thing over and over and over again, you're not going to be as effective in the long run. So other possible tactics: high insecticide rates, only used after plant injury is detected. So if you're using an insecticide, you want to make sure if you're using a high rate of insecticide, you want to make sure that that plant is already injured, because it's going to take that plant out, or it's going to make it look pretty weak. So lowest effective rate helps entire population to regain susceptibility, and mixing pesticides with different modes of action. So maybe synergistic, may develop insects with multiple resistances, but if you're switching out your product, more often than not, that's going to be more effective than using the same thing over time. So factors for effective pesticide use: rate and time are related to the pest life cycle, good coverage, potential for damage. And let's go back for a second. So talking about the factors for effective pesticide use, like I've been saying this entire time, you want to make sure you're rotating your products, because if you're using the same thing over and over again, they're going to build a resistance. I know I keep saying that, but and then the other thing I keep saying is you want to make sure that you're reading the label on what your pesticide is going to do, what insects it's going to take out, and then also the duration of that insecticide and how often you should use it in between sprays. So if you're forced to use the same thing over time, you want to make sure you're pretty diligent on keeping up with that schedule. But beware of resistances and that insect becoming totally resistant over time. So going back to last week's stuff, you want to make sure that if you have a massive infestation, I mean something that looks like it's not going to be manageable, you want to get rid of those plants immediately, because the most important thing in your greenhouse is being able to build and sell as much product as possible. So if you're just like kind of working on this over and over and over again, just get rid of that product. So other than that, that is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, you can contact me down in the landscape design classroom. we're going to be getting more into pesticides here in the near future, especially if you're a senior in this class, because you will be applying for or testing for your applicator's license. But like I said, please contact me with any questions and have a great day.